I've done several takes, and I'm just going to use this one regardless if it's perfect. Hello, this is my book talk on The Feather Thief by one Kirk Wallace Johnson. It was published in 2018, and it follows the crime of one Edwin Rist, committed in 2010, where he stole dozens, if not hundreds, of bird specimens from the Tring Museum in London. He considered stowing the birds away for years, maybe decades, selling them only after the police stopped searching. Or he could go ahead with his plan, making sure that he supplied a good enough cover story for each sale he made. How bright were these people anyhow, he reasoned, if it took them a full month to realize they'd been robbed? Surely they'd forget about them soon enough. This book had a very unique framing device. It was kind of a story inside of a story. Kirk W. Johnson it really just follows his obsession. He followed this case, this crime, for years and years, trying to find where the missing birds went, because the museum never really recovered them all, much less scientifically intact. Which is to say, they lacked they would have tags on their feet that would tell where they came from, like the longitude, latitude, and what year they were from. And without them, they were scientifically useless. It has a lot of shifting tenses, tones, and views, showing Johnson's own opinion, as well as the story of Rist, his friend Long, and the plight of several conservationists and those who actually collected the bird specimens. So it has a lot of emphasis on context, like why Rist became so obsessed and what fly tying was, why people wanted these birds. Again, emphasis on context. Johnson tried to allow us to understand all sides of the story. So he wrote how they were collected by Russell Wallace, how they were kept in the museum for years and years, how generations of conservationists studied them, and how fly tyers became obsessed with the feathers because they had a feather boom in the 1800s. Important figures on the side of the fly tyers are Edwin Rist, the person who committed the crime, and his friend Long. I was unable to find the first name for him because it was only mentioned like once or twice in the entire book. But Long was kind of the fall guy for this because he was actually who sold the feathers online to assist Edwin. And then on the side of conservationists, we have the person pursuing the feathers, Kirk Wallace Johnson, and then the one who actually collected the birds 200 years ago, Russell Wallace. And the main theme of the book is an examination of obsession and its fallouts. Johnson spent years of his life dedicated to this, and Rist gambled his entire future to steal those birds. Fly tyers in general are also just obsessed with using actual feathers. They could have, of these extinct birds, they could have used like dyed chicken feathers or like goose down. But no, they said that there's like a different feeling to using the actual birds of these endangered species. And just the Victorian feather trade. For decades, they would put entire birds on hats, and women would wear them on gowns. And it wiped out entire species. And then the obsession of one Walter Rothschild. I haven't really mentioned him, but he was the founder of the Tring Museum. He was a rich kid, and he spent a great deal of his family fortune on building that museum and hoarding all of these oddities and feathers and all this work. And he had to sell a lot of it because, again, he went bankrupt. The ending of the book is very open to interpretation. It resolves Johnson's obsession with him, in the end, naming his newborn son after Russell Wallace and just giving up on the whole thing. understanding that these feathers are gone. And then there's the resolution of the legal ramifications. Edwin Rist, he was acquitted because the jury thought that he had Asperger's, which he may have faked. It's left to interpretation whether he faked them, but he was only on probation because they thought, oh, he's autistic. He didn't understand the importance of these skins. He was just obsessed. And the whole opinion of whether it was right for him to take the feathers, whether it was okay for someone that obsessed to take them, or if it was really a crime was it a victimless crime, or was science somehow damaged? Was humanity damaged by this crime, and we've just forgotten about it? That's very much left to interpretation. I personally subscribe to the idea that science has been damaged by this crime, and it needs to be stopped. And it's an entirely unique book. I've never seen a story like it. Related to the obsession of Johnson, just that need for something to do and the need for closure for something. Part of the reason he did this was he needed to escape a really stressful company that he ran and his time in the war in Afghanistan. And I felt sympathy for the plight of those curators and scientists and the frustration of Johnson for those who don't care. Because many of these people, they bought those bird skins and they never returned them. They just thought, oh, that museum is just hoarding skins. They don't need all of them. There's no real scientific meaning. But there is. And now there's just empty drawers. And Russel Wallace spent years and years to collect all of them. And now they're just gone. It's disheartening. But I feel like it'd fare well with anyone 9th grade and above. I plan to have my dad read it. And the framing device, like I said, is very unique. And Johnson delves into a great deal of context and puts you in the mind of both sides. Both the fly tyers and the conservationists through his account of the legendary Russel Wallace and the era's feather boom. And they both appreciate the sheer beauty of the birds in question. Wallace is reported as writing about these glittering specimens, all these beautiful colors, and the songs they make. And he kept trying to take them back to England, and he only had one success, because they kept dying in the cages. Like, humanity wasn't supposed to keep that beauty in a box, but they still did. They still put them on hats and gowns and all this. It's a pretty easy read in terms of vocabulary and conveys its themes well. I'd offer it to anyone who would listen. I recommend it to anyone who can read it, but particularly those inclined towards science, falling down rabbit holes, and who want the intrigue and rush of a mystery thriller, but without the knowledge and depiction of murder. I don't recommend it for anyone younger than around 14 for maybe a lack of maturity, or for anyone especially dissatisfied by open endings. I very much enjoyed the book, but I had difficulty completing my schoolwork with its unique framing device, and the central theme of obsession was thoughtfully put, and I had a lovely 10 minutes of awestruck silence after every chapter. 5 stars. Thank you.